So I do want to walk you through your PowerPoint notes. So if you're able to pull it up, or else you can go back and look at it after I go through this. But I'm going to kind of go through it on my phone so that you can kind of talk out some of the answers as I go through it. So your PowerPoint that I uploaded yesterday, that in your notes is page 68, I believe, goes over Roosevelt and his second New Deal plans. Remember, Roosevelt does win a second term in office. I know we shared the fun fact that he actually gets elected 4 times, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 4, I'm sorry, and passes away during his 4th term in office. So his second New Deal is to pump through another 100 days plus pieces of legislation. You've got the WPA is Works Progress Administration. The Social Security Act is something that they do push through. And then we've got, hold on, my phone's going really slow because it's flipping through all the pictures. Oh, here's what I was going to share. One of the things that it talks about as a form of communication is him doing his fireside chats on the radio, but also because people need entertainment. They have a brilliant idea of putting a radio show on that one night, and it was Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, which it was a book that became a radio experience that has become a movie today, which I don't know if that's a Tom Cruise movie, I can't remember who plays in that one, but it scared a lot of people because if you didn't catch it at the very beginning, they said this is just a reading of the book War of the Worlds, but if you tuned in halfway through the program, it sounded like a real, honest, legit experience that was happening, that aliens were showing up and taking over, and people that tuned in halfway through the program started freaking out thinking that this was actually happening. And so after call-ins to the radio station, they finally had to stop every couple of minutes and tell people that this is just a reading of Orson Welles' book War of the Worlds, that this is not a real event that's occurring, because people were freaking out, running to the store, locking themselves in their basement, calling the police. And so it was really kind of crazy that people that didn't know any better thought that that was a real incident happening. All right, so the next one talks about all the other new legislation that's coming out, which a lot of this is actually on your IDs and in your packet for Section 2. The National Labor Relations Act, talking about the Wagner Act, which is giving people the right to unionize. It's encouraging businesses to do collective bargaining. The Fair Labor Standards Act, I'm going to just star that because that is the very beginning of setting a set minimum wage. And there's only a tiny difference that's changed from what we have today, because originally it was 44 hours was a set full-time working week. Today it's 40, so it's not actually changed that much. But do star Fair Standards Act. We do see the growth of organizations like the AFL, the CIO, as well as other labor groups. The next page, I want you to star the whole thing, the whole court packing incident. Star it, highlight it, circle it, underline it. That's probably one of the biggest things that Roosevelt gets kind of hated on for, because a lot of people feel like he was overstepping his bounds. The Supreme Court did not like his creation of the Agricultural Adjustment Act and the creation of the NRA. They said that it went above and beyond your First Amendment rights, your Fourth Amendment rights, and said that the government was taking in too much power by telling people what to do, like the AAA telling farmers not to farm, and instead they'll be receiving pensions. And so they told Roosevelt, you can't do that, and Roosevelt came up with the idea of adding, how many is it? 6, making sure I had my number right, adding 6 more justices to the Supreme Court, which would make it 15 total, because there's 9 on there 8 judges and 1 Supreme Court justice. So they really get upset at Roosevelt for trying to do that, because anytime a president comes into office and there are Supreme Court judge positions, cabinet positions that are open, the president picks who he wants for that. So they know whoever he's going to pick is going to be somebody that's going to side with his view on this. It does not happen. It does not follow through. It gets shut down pretty quickly, because that would change. I think it's either Article 2 or 3 in the Constitution that talks about the Supreme Court, and there's no way we're going to go back and start rewriting parts of the Constitution because of that. So his court packing incident was kind of a stain on his resume. A lot of people felt like he was trying to use too much power and upset the whole checks and balances system by doing that. But it didn't happen. The court did shut down the AAA as well as the NRA. But make sure that you start that. It's going to be a quiz question, test question. If you take the final, it's going to be a final exam question. So just make yourself a note of that. As far as women during this time period, women are still being picked second over getting jobs. Again, we talked about the assumption that it's believed that men need the job more because they're trying to support a family at home. Women still aren't receiving equal pay, and especially women of color are being pushed down the list further than that. We know that one thing that Eleanor Roosevelt does as First Lady is that she's trying to help women and minorities as kind of her contribution while being in the White House. And so one exciting thing that we do see happen, I do want you to star this, is the fact that Frances Perkins is the first female cabinet member ever. And so take a look at that slide that shows her picture, because it's her surprise face. I love it. It's so cute. So make sure that you star that, first female cabinet member, and she is going to be over the Department of Labor. So that's a really big issue. Gives her a chance to push for women getting equal pay, equal job opportunities across the board, because those are things that are still being worked on. And not just jobs, but government programs are giving preferences to men over women, again, with the assumption that the man needs the job more than the woman does, that he's the breadwinner, the provider, not asking the questions. They don't know if he's a single man, and they're not asking to find out that maybe the woman is a widow with 10 kids she's trying to feed. They're not asking those questions. The last one that I'll go over today, because I do want to spend some time talking about some of this tomorrow, especially the part of the entertainment piece, which I realize now I actually went a little ahead of myself on that. The last one I'll talk about today is talking about African Americans, I'm sorry. So we do see the creation of what we call the Black Cabinet during this time period, and I think we talked about it a little bit last week. Roosevelt does want to assist and push civil rights, but he's a little scared that if he makes that a top priority right now, that will put in jeopardy his vie for the election in 1940, which it probably would have. So he decides that he's not going to push for rights for minorities right now, just because he does want to look ahead to the future and look ahead at running for a third term in office. African Americans do come to support the Democratic Party during this time period. This is where we see a change and a shift in the supporters for each political party. We've seen that change. Lincoln was a Republican, and minorities were voting for Republicans, but this is when we see a change in minorities moving to support the Democratic Party while Roosevelt's in office. So again, we do see the creation of what we call the Black Cabinet. We still have that today. That is still very much a piece of history that we have maintained. But we do notice that minorities still are not getting the support they should. A very famous singer, Marian Anderson, is supposed to be performing in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., and they end up having to shut that down because she gets booed, and they get a crowd that shows up that does not support her being there. So it's pretty obvious that it's going to be a long, hard fight to the civil rights movement that officially breaks out into the 1950s and 60s. So I'm going to stop there as far as your notes, but I'll finish tomorrow.